A letter with no return address, a photo of a teenage girl, and 5 words that shattered everything Keanu Reeves thought he knew. She's yours, and she needs you. What happens next will challenge his heart, test his past, and lead to a discovery so personal it will melt yours. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. It was late afternoon in the Hollywood Hills, the sun soft against the windows of Keanu Reeves' home. The quiet was a kind he'd come to appreciate. No phone ringing, no crew calls, no fans waiting outside. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional breeze brushing against the balcony doors. Keanu was sipping a mug of tea, reading a weathered copy of Rainer Maria Rilke's letters, when the knock came. Not the doorbell. A knock. Sharp, deliberate, almost out of place. He stood, set the book aside, and opened the door. No one. Just a small manila envelope lying neatly on the welcome mat. No postage, no name, no return address. He bent down, picked it up. It felt oddly heavy for its size. He turned it over. Nothing, just the seal. No handwriting, no label. He carried it back inside, brow furrowed, heart already uneasy in a way he couldn't explain. He slid his finger beneath the flap and opened it slowly. Inside was a single black and white photo and a folded letter. He looked at the photo first. A teenage girl, dark hair, serious eyes, standing in front of a mural painted on a cracked brick wall. She couldn't have been older than 16. He turned the photo over. A single name was written in faded ink. Isabel. Underneath, in shakier handwriting, "She's yours." Keanu's breath caught. He unfolded the letter with careful fingers, almost afraid of what it might say. The paper had the soft give of something kept hidden for too long. The ink had bled in places, but the words were clear. Keanu, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Her name is Isabel. She's your daughter. I never told you, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how. Back then, everything was chaos. The film set, the late nights, the city lights, and when I found out I was pregnant, I couldn't find you. You were already gone. She doesn't know about you. I never had the chance to tell her, but she needs someone now. She's smart, strong, a little stubborn, she gets that from me, but the rest, her kindness, her curiosity, the way she looks out for people, I think that's you. She's yours, and she needs you now. Please don't turn away. Lily. Keanu sat back, letter trembling in his hands. Lily, a name he hadn't heard in decades. A name wrapped in memories he thought had faded for good. He stared out the window, not really seeing the trees swaying in the wind. She'd been a bright spark in a complicated time. They'd met during a small independent film in the early 90s. Both young, both hungry for something real. She was funny, sharp, and effortlessly grounded. While others chased fame, she painted between takes. She once brought him soup when he was sick on set, sitting by his trailer reading poetry aloud until he fell asleep. And then, she vanished. He always assumed she'd moved on, a different project, a new life. He never looked into it. At the time, he didn't know how to ask the questions that mattered. Now he realized one had been waiting all along. A daughter? His daughter. Isabel. He looked back at the photo. There was something unmistakable in the eyes. The same depth, the same steady quiet. How many birthdays had he missed? First steps, first teeth, first heartbreak. Keanu set the letter down and rubbed his face with both hands. He didn't feel panic, or anger, or even fear. Just a strange ache, like something had always been missing, and now he knew what it was. A reason. A responsibility. A second chance. The hours passed in stillness. Keanu didn't turn on the lights. He sat at the kitchen table with only the last traces of daylight painting long shadows across the floor. The letter lay beside the photo, both gently curled at the edges. as if aged by time and grief. He stared at them for what felt like forever. No calls were made, no internet searches, not yet. His mind was too full, and somehow too quiet. He poured himself another cup of tea, though it had long gone cold, and walked to the fireplace. Sat on the floor with his back against the wall. The weight of what he had missed pressed into his chest like stone. A child, his child, a girl growing up without knowing who her father was, or that he existed. He thought of all the years he had spent chasing stories, on screen, in books, through roles that let him be anyone but himself. But no character he had ever played came close to this moment. This wasn't fiction. This was blood, responsibility, and a second chance he hadn't earned, but maybe, just maybe, had been given. He held the photo again, gently, like it might break. "She's yours." The house had gone completely dark. Keanu didn't move from the floor. His legs had gone numb, but he barely noticed. Outside, the city sparkled in silence. Inside, his thoughts swirled with memories, regrets, and questions he couldn't begin to answer. He whispered her name aloud. Isabel. It felt unfamiliar and sacred all at once. He stood up slowly and carried the photo upstairs, past the framed posters and movie memorabilia, into the quiet sanctuary of his bedroom. On the nightstand sat a framed photo of his mother, one of River, and a tiny wooden carving his sister had given him long ago. He added the photo of Isabel gently beside them, a place among those he had loved most. Then he sat on the edge of the bed, hunched forward, elbows on knees, and let the weight settle. What kind of father could he be now? What did she know? Would she even want to meet him? But beneath the uncertainty was something else, something quiet but solid. He wanted to try, because whatever came next, no matter how hard, no matter how late, he couldn't pretend anymore that she didn't exist. He wouldn't let her be alone. Not again. The sky began to lighten. It wasn't quite morning, but the edges of the night were starting to blur with soft gold. Keanu hadn't slept, but he didn't feel tired, just full, awake in a way he hadn't felt in years. He stood at the window, arms crossed, watching the horizon shift. Then he turned back toward the nightstand, picked up the letter, folded it neatly, and placed it back in the envelope. He tucked it into the inside pocket of his coat. Next, the photo. He stared at it again, this time not with disbelief, but with purpose. Then he picked up his phone. No headlines, no agents, no friends. Not yet. He opened his contacts and scrolled until he found a single name: Adam Grayson, former bodyguard, now private investigator, discreet, loyal. He typed, "Need help finding someone. Her name is Isabel, I think. She's my daughter." Then he set the phone down and let out a long breath. Everything had changed. And yet, somehow, it felt like the beginning of something that had been waiting all along. Downstairs, the mug of cold tea still sat on the counter. The copy of Rilke's letters lay face down, forgotten. In their place, a single photo had taken over every thought, every breath. Keanu had always believed life gave second chances to the brave, but tonight, he realized it also gave second chances to the broken-hearted. You just had to be willing to face them. He took one last look at the sunrise before heading back inside. The city was beginning to stir, unaware that something extraordinary had shifted within its hills. Keanu Reeves, so often cast as a hero on screen, was about to step into the most real role of his life. Not with lines or lighting, but with heart and time and love that had waited too long. Upstairs, he picked up a notebook and jotted a single line on the first page. Her name is Isabel. Then he closed the cover, set it beside his bed, and sat down. His heart braced, his mind focused. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, in the stillness, one truth remained. He had a daughter. And no matter what came next, he would not let her go unseen again. The name lingered like smoke in the corners of Keanu's mind. Lily. She had been more than a co-star, more than a passing flame. Their time together had been brief, barely 6 months, during the filming of a quiet art house film in upstate New York. The movie itself had long faded into cinematic obscurity, but Lily had burned into his memory with a kind of quiet intensity. She wasn't loud or dramatic. She didn't try to impress him. She didn't need to. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and made it feel smaller, more focused. With her, everything slowed down. Dinners in small diners, long walks after wrap, laughing in the cold outside her trailer, huddled under shared blankets, whispering about dreams that never made it to camera. He remembered the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the way she read poetry aloud, Pablo Neruda, sometimes Dickinson. The way she called him Reeves, like he was someone from a novel. And then she was gone. No goodbye, no note, no word. Just a silence that had stretched over years. Until now. Keanu sat on the edge of his bed, the letter spread across his lap once more. He read it again, slower this time. Every word hit differently now. Not just as information, but as a confession, a plea, a goodbye. Lily hadn't told him she was pregnant. She hadn't chased him down. She hadn't asked for anything. And still, in the letter, there was no bitterness, no anger, just love for the child they had made together, and the quiet hope that maybe, someday, their paths would cross again. She's smart, strong, a little stubborn. He closed his eyes and imagined Isabel, what she looked like when she laughed, how she walked, what her voice sounded like. But the truth was, she was a stranger, and he was a stranger to her. The ache in his chest deepened. How do you become a father to someone who's already grown? Not in diapers, not learning to walk, but fully formed, with memories, opinions, and probably a lifetime of questions he didn't have answers to. He hadn't even been a thought in her life. How could he now be a presence? The letter had opened a door, but stepping through it, that was something else entirely. He paced the room slowly, letting the weight of it all settle in. Lily had done everything alone. The pregnancy, the birth, raising Isabel through scraped knees and bad dreams, first days of school, first heartbreaks, illness, growth. And when she got sick herself, when she faced the end, she had chosen not to burden him, not to blame him, just to send him this letter, this final gesture. How many nights had Lily watched Isabel sleep, wondering if she should reach out? How many birthdays had passed with unsent letters and unresolved hope? Keanu imagined her sitting at a kitchen table late at night, pen in hand, trying to find the words. She had always been composed, but this letter had trembled, and the fact that she had waited until the end told him everything. She had never stopped believing he might care. And now he did. He cared more than he knew how to explain. Not because it was expected, not because of guilt, but because Isabel existed. She was real. She was his. And that changed everything. He sat again, the room quiet as a held breath, and whispered the name that would soon change his entire life. Isabel. He pulled out an old box from the back of his closet, one he hadn't touched in years. Inside were scraps of past lives, film set photos, postcards, handwritten notes from castmates, scripts scribbled with coffee stains and rewrites. At the very bottom, folded and creased, was a black and white cast photo from the shoot, with Lily. They stood near each other, shoulders barely touching, both of them smiling in that quietly private way people do when no one else quite understands. He traced her face with his eyes. She looked different then, so full of light, so grounded in a world of make-believe. How had he not known? Was there a moment, a glance, a hesitation? Did she try to tell him and he missed it? He had always been kind, but back then he was also restless, busy, pulled in too many directions. Maybe she saw that. Maybe she decided he wouldn't be ready. And maybe she was right. Back then, he hadn't even known who he was, much less what kind of father he could be. But now the question was no longer if he was ready. It was whether he had the courage to try. The next morning, Keanu sat at his kitchen counter, pouring coffee he didn't plan to drink. He was still holding the photo. He tried to imagine the missing years. Did she like books? Did she hate math? Was she allergic to anything? Did she love dogs? Had she ever watched one of his movies, unknowingly watching her father on screen? The questions swirled without answers, and every one of them stung. He had missed so much, too much, and no matter what he did now, he would never get those years back. No lullabies, no scraped knees patched with a kiss, no nervous walk to the first day of school, no awkward teen phase, no school dances, no whispered stories before bedtime. He hadn't been there, and that truth carved a hollow space inside him so deep he didn't know where it ended. But grief wasn't going to fix it. He couldn't change the past, but he could change what came next. He could give her a father now, if she wanted him. He picked up the letter again and read the final line. She needs you now. That was all he needed to know. He pulled out his phone again, thumb hovering over the screen. This wasn't a role. There were no lines, no director. Just a man trying to reach his daughter. He texted Adam Grayson again. She might go by Isabel. No last name yet. Can you start with schools, private ones, maybe public, maybe art programs? Adam responded in seconds. On it. Keanu stared at the screen. This was real now. The gears had turned. The silence was over. Still, the haunting question returned, louder than before. How do you become a father to someone who's already grown? He didn't know, but he knew how to listen, how to show up, how to be patient when words didn't come easy. He could start there. He walked over to the fireplace, where the photo now rested above the mantel. A new edition, a new story beginning. He took a deep breath. The fear hadn't gone, but it no longer ruled him. There was something bigger now. Hope. And with that, Keanu stepped into the next chapter, one where he wouldn't just be remembered on screen, but maybe finally in someone's heart. As a father. That night, sleep didn't come easy. Keanu lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the soft hum of the night wrapping around him like a question still unanswered. He thought about Lily again, how hard it must have been to raise Isabel without support, how brave she was to hold on to that secret, and how deeply she must have loved their daughter to make this her final wish. In the quiet, he imagined what it would be like to meet Isabel. Would she have her mother's laugh? Would she resent him? Or would she just want to know who he really was, not the actor, not the name, but the man behind all of it? He whispered her name again, not to rehearse, not to practice, just to say it. Isabel. It sounded like a beginning. He sat up, turned on the light, and opened his notebook again. This time, he didn't write a scene or a line of dialogue. He wrote a letter, not for release, not for the public, just for her. It began simply, Dear Isabel, I should have been there. I know that, but I am here now, and if you'll let me, I'll never leave again. He signed the letter with a trembling hand, folded it, and placed it beside the photo. He didn't know when he'd deliver it, or how, but it was a start, and in this unexpected journey into fatherhood, a start, however small, was everything. Tomorrow the search would begin. Tonight he had hope, and that was more than enough. Outside his window, the city continued its rhythm. Cars passing, lights flickering, lives moving on unaware. But inside, a shift had taken place. Keanu wasn't the same man he'd been yesterday. He was someone's father now, and that meant everything. Somewhere out there, a young woman named Isabel might be wondering if anyone cared, and he was going to make sure the answer was yes. He would find her, whatever it took. The email came at 4:42 a.m. Keanu was already awake, staring at the ceiling again, when his phone buzzed quietly on the nightstand. He reached for it with a mixture of hope and dread. Subject, found her. It was from Adam Grayson, just 2 words in the body of the message. Portland, Transitional Youth Shelter, name confirmed, attached report. Keanu's heart stopped for a beat. He sat up in bed and opened the attachment. Isabel was listed as a current resident at a shelter called Riverlight House, a non-profit dedicated to helping young adults aging out of foster care. No last name was attached in the file, just Isabel, 17. Under guardianship of the state since last year, caseworker assigned. School enrolled but inconsistent attendance. Part-time job at a used bookstore on Hawthorne. Keanu scrolled to the end of the report and saw it. Mother, Lily Harrison, deceased March last year. Cancer. He didn't blink for a long time. She had been gone for over a year, and Isabel, his daughter, had been navigating it alone. No family, no home, just a city that didn't know her name. Until now. Keanu closed the file and stood quietly, heart pounding with quiet resolve. Portland in late October was soaked in gold and gray. Keanu arrived under a quiet drizzle, dressed in layers and anonymity. Baseball cap, hooded jacket, simple jeans. No entourage, no cameras, just a man trying not to be noticed. He didn't go straight to the shelter. Instead, he walked the surrounding blocks. Not pacing, just orienting himself. Learning the rhythm of her world. That afternoon, he stopped by the used bookstore mentioned in the report. A narrow little space tucked between a record shop and a cafe, its window painted with swirls of vines and hand-lettered quotes. Inside, the scent of worn pages and dust welcomed him. And there, behind the counter, was Isabel. She wore a faded maroon sweater and a scarf knotted carelessly at her neck. Her dark hair was pulled into a low bun. She was shelving books with quiet focus, occasionally tucking loose strands of hair behind her ear. Keanu stood near a rotating rack of old paperbacks, heart hammering in his chest. She didn't look up. She didn't know him. Of course she didn't. But he knew her now with a certainty deeper than blood. He left without speaking, the doorbell chiming softly behind him. The next morning, Keanu stood across the street from Riverlight House. It didn't look like a shelter, more like a large converted home. Peeling paint, a porch swing missing one chain, garden beds choked with weeds. But the windows were warm with light. Music played faintly from inside, laughter echoed somewhere through an open window. Keanu crossed the street and introduced himself with quiet honesty. I'm not press, not media. I'm trying to understand someone's story. Her name is Isabel. The staff was cautious at first, but when he mentioned Lily Harrison's name, the tone shifted. A woman named Carla, one of the lead volunteers, softened. She's one of our most creative residents. Keeps to herself, reads a lot, draws. Hard to reach sometimes, but she's kind. Always kind. They didn't say more. Confidentiality was sacred here. But the look in Carla's eyes said enough. This girl had been through fire and was still standing. Later that evening, Keanu sat in a nearby cafe with his notebook open, watching the shelter from across the street. He sketched the outline of her silhouette from memory. The way she stood behind the counter, the way she moved, cautious, deliberate, with quiet strength. He felt awe and guilt. For the next 3 days, Keanu kept the same quiet pattern. He visited the bookstore in the late afternoons, always browsing, never lingering too long. He sat in the cafe across the street from the shelter, sipping coffee that went cold as he watched her return in the evenings. Sometimes alone, sometimes walking with another resident. She always had a sketchbook with her, always carried herself with a certain distance, like someone trying to take up less space. And every day, Keanu felt the question tighten around his chest. How do you walk into someone's life without breaking it? He didn't want to startle her, didn't want to cause pain, but he couldn't stay silent forever. So on the 4th day, he stepped into the bookstore 1 minute before closing. The streets outside were slick with rain, and the bell above the door let out a tired chime. Isabel glanced up. Their eyes met for the first time, just for a second. Then she looked away, gently stacking a pile of books. "We're about to close," she said. Keanu nodded. "I know." And he walked out again, heart racing, knowing tomorrow he'd have to say something real. The next afternoon, Keanu returned, earlier this time. He browsed for a while, letting the quiet hum of the shop calm his nerves. Isabel was at the register, reading a dog-eared paperback between customers. She looked up briefly, then back down. When he approached the counter with a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, she gave a faint smile. "Good choice," she said. "You've read it?" Keanu asked softly. She nodded. 3 times. Her voice was calm, measured, a little guarded. Keanu hesitated, then said, "My name's Keanu." She looked up sharply, one eyebrow rising. "Like the actor?" He smiled gently. "Yeah, kind of like that." Her mouth quirked slightly. "We get a lot of weird names in here." Keanu laughed. "I'm not trying to be weird, just trying to be normal." She scanned the book. "Well, you're off to a decent start." It was the smallest of connections, but it was real. He paid in cash and left $1 in the tip jar. "Thanks, Isabel," he said on the way out. She blinked. "Did I tell you my name?" Keanu paused in the doorway, his voice soft. It was in the report on the counter. And then he walked out. That night, back in his hotel room, Keanu couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, the rain streaking down the glass, the lights of the city blurring like memories he hadn't made. He replayed the conversation over and over, her voice, her hesitation, the flicker of curiosity in her eyes. She hadn't recognized him. Or maybe she had, but didn't want to say. Either way, it didn't matter. What mattered was the moment. It had been simple, ordinary, and sacred. He pulled out his notebook again and opened to a blank page. This time, he didn't write a letter. He sketched the bookstore's entrance, the curve of the counter, the faint outline of Isabel behind it, her hair loose this time, her head tilted slightly as she read. He wasn't an artist, but the image came easily. She was in his mind now, fixed, vivid, alive. He folded the paper carefully and tucked it into the inside pocket of his coat. Tomorrow, he'd return. Not with answers, not with expectations, just presence. Because sometimes, showing up is the beginning of everything. And if Isabel let him, he'd be there every step of the way, even if it took forever. He found himself wondering what she dreamed about, what music she liked, if she had any idea how deeply she resembled her mother, not just in her eyes, but in her stillness. He imagined their next conversation. Maybe he'd bring her tea. Maybe he'd ask about the sketchbook. He wouldn't rush it, wouldn't dare tell her the truth until she was ready to hear it. But he'd be there, one book at a time, one quiet question at a time. He imagined walking with her down Hawthorne Street, telling her stories not as a father, but as a man trying to earn the right to be one. He imagined her laughing, even if it took weeks. And when the moment came, when he finally said, "There's something I need to tell you," he hoped she'd feel the love in it, not just the shock. He wasn't trying to rewrite her life. He just wanted to be part of what came next. He turned off the lamp. Rain tapped softly against the glass, like a heartbeat returning after silence. Tomorrow, he'd return. And maybe, just maybe, a door would open. And a girl would see her father, not just a stranger in the stacks. For the first time since receiving that letter, Keanu felt something more than grief or guilt. He felt the smallest flicker of purpose. A reason to stay, to wait, to try. He didn't know what tomorrow would hold, but he knew this. He was no longer walking away from the past. He was walking towards someone who still didn't know he was her future. And he would keep walking, quietly, patiently, until the day she turned around and saw him not as a mystery, but as a father she never knew she was still waiting for. Hope? The next day, Keanu arrived earlier than usual. This time, he wasn't just passing by. He came with a quiet intention. No plan, no script, just a need to talk, to listen, to be near her again, not as a stranger but as something closer to what he hoped to become. The bell above the bookstore door jingled softly as he stepped inside. Isabel looked up from behind the counter. She was wearing a different sweater, navy blue with frayed cuffs. Her expression was calm, neutral, the kind reserved for regular customers who didn't cause trouble. "You're back," she said. Keanu nodded. "I forgot to ask what you're reading." She closed the book in her hand and held it up. "It's a reread, The Bell Jar." "That's a heavy one," he said gently. She shrugged. "Some books find you more than once, especially when you're trying to understand yourself." Keanu smiled at her honesty. "That's true. Some books change depending on where you are in life." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "You talk like someone who reads a lot." "I try," he said, offering a soft chuckle. "Lately I've been drawn to stories about second chances." Isabel nodded. "Those are the good ones." There was a lull in the store, and after a few more quiet exchanges, Keanu gestured toward the cafe next door. "Can I buy you a coffee? Just as thanks for the book recommendation." Isabel hesitated. Her eyes narrowed slightly, protective, but after a moment she nodded. "Sure, I've got 10 minutes." They walked next door together, the sidewalk damp with the remnants of morning rain. The cafe was warm, filled with the scent of espresso and cinnamon. Keanu ordered 2 cups, one black, one with oat milk and cinnamon on top, just like the barista said she usually did. Isabel raised an eyebrow. "You asked them?" He shrugged. "I'm good at noticing things." They sat near the window, the street humming softly beyond the glass. Isabel cradled her drink and stared at the steam for a moment before speaking. "So, what do you do? You're not a local." Keanu smiled. "I work in film, mostly behind the scenes now." She nodded slowly. "Figures. You've got that face, like I've seen you before." He chuckled. "People say that?" They sat in comfortable silence for a beat. Then she said, almost without emotion, "My mom was into movies. Old ones. She passed last year." "I'm sorry," he said gently. Isabel nodded once, her eyes fixed on a distant spot beyond the cafe window. She used to talk about the past like it was a painting she never finished. Beautiful in places, but full of empty patches. Keanu listened without interrupting, letting the rhythm of her thoughts unfold. "She told me once that she made peace with her choices, that not everyone gets a perfect story, and that I'd have to learn how to be okay with unanswered questions." Keanu's hands tightened slightly around his cup. Isabel continued, quieter now. "I always wondered about my dad, but she never said much, just that he was kind, not ready. She said he didn't know." Keanu swallowed hard. "She did say his name." "No," Isabel said. "I asked when I was younger, but she just changed the subject. After a while, I stopped asking, figured it was too late to care." Her voice cracked, just slightly on the last word. Keanu leaned forward, voice gentle. "Sometimes the questions that hurt the most are the ones that deserve answers." She gave him a sideways glance. "You sound like someone who's lost people too." "I have," he said softly. "Enough to know what regret feels like." The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was thoughtful. Isabel took a sip of her coffee, then turned to him. "You ever wish you could go back and change something?" Keanu looked out at the rain, his voice low. "All the time. But sometimes the past isn't meant to be fixed, just understood." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, that sounds like something my mom would have said." He smiled, warmed by the connection. She tapped her fingers against the ceramic mug. "I used to think I'd write a book someday, maybe a graphic novel, but then life got messy." "Life usually does," Keanu said, "but messy makes for the best stories." She gave him a small, crooked smile. "That sounds like something a writer would say." "I've spent my whole life around stories," he said. "Acting in them, reading them, living them." She tilted her head. "So you're an actor?" He hesitated, then nodded. Sometimes. I thought you looked familiar. Keanu didn't confirm it. He didn't need to. Instead, he asked, "What would your book be about?" She looked surprised by the question, thought for a moment, then whispered, "Someone looking for their place. Someone with pieces missing." They sat in silence again, but this time it was heavier. Isabel's eyes didn't leave the window. "I used to think that if I found out who my dad was, it would fix something. Like maybe everything that was broken in me would make sense." Keanu's throat tightened. "But then I got older, and I figured, if he didn't know or didn't care, maybe it was better that way. I mean, who wants to be someone's accident?" Keanu felt his breath leave him. "You're not an accident," he said, the words almost too quiet. She turned to look at him, something unreadable in her expression. "You don't even know me," she said softly. "No," Keanu said, "but I can see that you're strong, thoughtful, creative. And I think sometimes the people who go unseen are the ones who carry the most." Isabel blinked rapidly, then looked away. Keanu reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it gently across the table. "My number. No pressure, no expectations, just if you ever need someone to talk to." She stared at it for a moment. "Why would you do that?" "Because you matter." She didn't take the paper right away. Instead, she stared at it, like it might disappear if she blinked. Then, slowly, she reached out and picked it up, folded it, slipped it into the front pocket of her coat. "Thanks," she said, barely louder than a whisper. Keanu gave a small nod. He didn't press, didn't ask for anything more. He finished his coffee, gave her one last smile, and stood to leave. As he reached the door, she called out, "Hey, Keanu?" He turned. She looked at him, not quite smiling, but not closed off either. "Second chances, right?" He felt his heart catch. "Right," he said. Then he stepped into the rain. It was softer now, a mist more than a downpour. The world felt hushed. He walked back to his rental car slowly, every part of him alive with something he hadn't felt in years. Fear, hope, tenderness. In his pocket was the sketch of her silhouette he'd drawn the night before. In her pocket was his number. He didn't know what would come next. But for the first time since he'd read that letter, he believed there might actually be a next. And maybe, just maybe, it would be beautiful. That evening, Keanu sat alone in his hotel room again, lights dimmed, the city's glow pulsing faintly through the curtains. He thought about the look in her eyes when she said second chances, the way she hesitated before taking the paper, how her voice caught when she talked about being someone's accident. She wasn't an accident. She was a miracle he hadn't known to look for, a page in his life that had never been written, but was always meant to be there. He thought of Lily again, her laughter, the quiet grace she carried, the way she used to rest her hand on his arm when she was about to say something serious. "I just want her to be okay," her letter had said. Keanu whispered into the quiet, "I will make sure she is." He didn't know if Isabel would ever call, didn't know if she'd want anything from him, but that didn't change what he felt. Love, unexpected and terrifying. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. It just shows up and waits. Because sometimes the most important conversations begin with silence and end with the courage to. Tomorrow he'd return to the bookstore and wait again. He left the lamp on as he drifted off to sleep, a quiet promise forming in his mind. No matter how long it took, no matter how many walls stood between them, he would be there. Not to force anything, not to fix what couldn't be undone, but to offer presence. And maybe in that presence she would find what she'd never been given, the steady heartbeat of someone who chose her, again and again. Because sometimes being a father starts not with answers, but with simply showing up and staying. Hope, after all, begins small. The days passed slowly, each one dragging behind the next like fog over the Pacific. Keanu returned to the bookstore twice, but Isabel wasn't working either time. He didn't ask the staff. He didn't want to push or pry. He simply browsed in silence, bought a book each visit, and left his number again, tucked into the pages like a secret. Back at the hotel, he kept his phone beside him, always on, always charged. At night, he would sit by the window with the sketch she'd inspired, fingers curled over its edges, as though he could will the past to rewrite itself. But the phone stayed silent until the fourth day. It rang at 6:12 p.m., just as the sky outside turned that dusky lavender shade he always loved. The caller ID was blocked. His heart clenched. He answered on the second ring. "Hello." There was a long pause, then a quiet voice. "Is this Keanu?" He stood up slowly. "Yeah, it's Isabel." He closed his eyes, the sound of her voice hitting him like a wave. "Hi." "I don't know why I'm calling," she said quickly. You seemed real, and I have questions." "I have time," he said. "As much as you need." They agreed to meet at Laurelhurst Park the next day, a quiet space with benches and old maple trees that looked like they had stories of their own. Keanu arrived early. He sat beneath a willow near the pond, the crisp autumn breeze rustling the leaves around him. Every sound felt amplified. The crunch of gravel, the creak of branches, the distant bark of a dog. Then he saw her. Isabel walked slowly down the path, hands tucked into her coat pockets, her eyes scanning the park until they met his. She approached without a smile, without anger, just a focused, unreadable calm. She sat beside him without a word. He let the silence stretch between them. Finally, she spoke. "You said I mattered." "You do," he replied. She pulled something from her bag, a black, worn sketchbook. "I've been drawing since I was little. It helped when things got bad." She flipped to a page in the middle and held it out. Keanu stared. It was a pencil sketch of a man, tall, kind-eyed, bearded, a quiet strength in his stance, a certain gentleness in the tilt of his head. "I used to imagine this was my dad," she said. Keanu couldn't speak. Because it was him, his breath hitched. He took the sketchbook gently, hands trembling. He traced the lines she'd drawn, his jaw, his shoulders, the shape of his eyes. It was him. Not an exact portrait, but the soul of him, rendered in graphite and memory. "I never knew," he whispered. Isabel frowned. "What?" Keanu turned to her, voice barely holding together. "Isabel, I never knew about you. Not until I got that letter." Her eyes sharpened. "What letter?" "From your mother, Lily. It came to my house. No return address. Just your picture. And a note." Isabel blinked rapidly. Keanu took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice. She wrote, "She's yours, and she needs you now." Silence. The wind picked up, scattering yellow leaves across the grass. "You're saying you're my father?" she asked, the words sharp, almost disbelieving. Keanu nodded slowly. She stood up so quickly the sketchbook fell from her lap. "No," she said, backing away. "No, that's not. This isn't funny." "I'm not joking," he said quietly, rising but keeping his distance. "I would never joke about something like this." Isabel's face contorted, shock, disbelief, then something deeper, anger. "You knew this whole time? You showed up and pretended? What, like you were a stranger?" "No," Keanu said quickly. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid if I said it too soon, it would ruin everything." She stepped back again. "So you lied. You let me talk about not knowing who my dad was while you sat there and listened like some kind stranger?" Keanu's voice cracked. "Because I didn't want to force myself into your life." Ilse's hands balled into fists. "But you already did. You walked into it with secrets. You watched me, talked to me, sat with me, knowing all along who you were. That's not kindness. That's manipulation." "I just wanted to know you," Keanu said, his voice hoarse. "To see you. To give you time." "Time," she echoed. You had 19 years, and you weren't there for any of them." He flinched. She was trembling now, her breathing shallow. Keanu didn't move closer. He knew enough to stay still. "I need space," she said sharply, and without waiting for a reply, she turned and walked away. Her boots crunched over the leaves. The sketchbook remained on the bench, face down, open to the drawing of the father she'd imagined, before she learned he was real and flawed. Keanu didn't chase her. He watched her disappear down the winding path, her figure growing smaller between the trees until she was just a shadow, then gone. He sat back down on the bench. His hands shook as he picked up the sketchbook, brushing the dirt from the cover. He turned to the page again, the one with the man drawn in hope, the one she had created from nothing but longing and dreams. He wasn't that man. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she had believed in him, before she knew who he really was. And that belief, it meant something. Keanu sat there until the sun dipped low, casting gold across the pond. People passed by, a few glanced his way, none recognizing him. Not as an actor, not as a father, just a man sitting alone with a broken sketchbook and an aching heart. He didn't cry. Not then, but something deeper than tears settled in his chest. An ache that didn't scream, but stayed. Heavy. Real. He pulled out his phone, scrolled to her contact, and typed only 3 words. "I'm still here." Then he closed the phone, set the sketchbook gently on his lap, and waited for the wind to change. Back at the hotel, Keanu entered his room in silence. He didn't turn on the lights. He just placed the sketchbook on the desk beside the lamp and sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the same jacket, still holding the ache like it was stitched into his skin. He thought about Lily, about how she must have wrestled with this secret for years. The loneliness she carried, the strength it must have taken to raise Isabel alone, knowing he was somewhere out there, never even aware of her name. And Isabel, that fury in her voice, the betrayal. He couldn't blame her. He didn't sleep that night. He didn't even try. He just sat in the armchair beside the window, watching the hours turn. The city never went dark, but his thoughts did. He ran over every word, every expression on her face, the way her voice broke when she said, "You had 19 years." In the morning, he packed slowly, neatly, left the sketchbook on the desk with a note inside. "If you want it back, it's yours. If you don't, I'll hold it for you." He left the key card at the front desk and walked into the cool morning air. As he walked, a memory surfaced. Lily, barefoot in a rehearsal studio, laughing as she danced between takes. They'd been rehearsing a scene that never made the final cut, something light, silly. But she made it unforgettable. "You're going to be a great dad someday," she'd teased, tossing a script at him like a paper plane. He had laughed back then, unknowing, unburdened, and now that line came back, haunting him. He paused at a small corner cafe, the kind that reminded him of Europe, ordered a coffee, sat outside in the chill, letting the steam warm his fingers. He didn't know what came next, didn't know if Isabel would forgive him, or even speak to him again. But he knew what he wouldn't do. He wouldn't vanish. He wouldn't hide. She had every right to be angry, every right to take her time. But if and when she was ready, he would be there, not to ask for anything, not even for love. Just to be present, fully, willingly. Because being a father wasn't about blood or names in a registry. It was about showing up, especially when it was hard, and waiting with your whole heart open, even in the silence. The sketchbook still sat in his hotel room, waiting, and so did he. Because love doesn't always arrive with celebration. Sometimes it arrives late, bruised and unexpected. But when it does, if you're lucky, you recognize it anyway. And hold the door open, just in case it wants to walk back through. So he stayed in Portland, extended his hotel another week, and returned to the park each morning. He didn't wait with hope or fear, but with quiet presence. Because sometimes the most important door isn't the one you walk through. It's the one you leave unlocked." The hotel room was silent except for the sound of a pen scratching across paper. Keanu sat at the desk, leaning over a lined notebook with a cup of tea beside him. The city outside was just waking, but he had been up for hours. No cameras, no directors, just the quiet company of regret and hope. He had never written a letter like this before. Not for a script, not for the press. For her. For Isabel. He stared at the top of the page for a long time before finally writing, "Dear Isabel, I'm writing you not to explain everything, because I know some things can't be explained, but to open a door, one I should have opened sooner." The words felt heavy, but honest. He continued, pouring his thoughts onto the page. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything at all, actually. This letter isn't about expectations. It's about telling the truth, finally. When I met your mother, I was young and directionless. She was light, fierce and graceful, and funny in ways that caught me off guard. And then, suddenly, she was gone. I never knew why." He paused, then kept writing. She didn't leave an address. No goodbye. No hint of what she carried with her. If I had known, Isabel, if I had even suspected, you would have never grown up without me trying to be part of your life. His handwriting faltered slightly, and he drew in a slow breath. I don't say that to make excuses, just to share what's true. I missed your first words, your first steps. I missed birthdays, braces, heartbreaks, all the things that shape a person into who they become. And knowing I wasn't there, it hurts more than I can say. But I also know that none of that pain belongs to you. You didn't choose this. Neither did I. But here we are." He looked out the window again, pausing as a bus rumbled past below. Then his pen moved again. "When I met you, I didn't see a stranger. I saw someone familiar. I saw your mother in your posture, your sarcasm, the way you spoke with care even when you were guarded. I saw something I didn't even know I had been missing." He underlined the last line lightly, then went on. "I'm not trying to replace anything. Not your memories, not your pain, not the story you've lived so far. I couldn't, even if I wanted to. What I hope is just to be something else now. Something you can lean on if and when you want to. A place to land, a hand to hold. A quiet presence that asks for nothing except the chance to be part of your life, however you define it." He added a softer note. "If you ever want to hear stories about your mom, I have a few. Some funny, some sad, all honest. She was someone I wish I'd known longer. But you're someone I'd like to know now." He signed the letter simply. "Always here, Keanu." Then he folded the pages, tucked them into a plain white envelope, and wrote only one word on the front: Isabel. The next morning, Keanu returned to the bookstore. It was just after opening, and the morning crowd hadn't arrived yet. The bell above the door jingled softly as he stepped inside, the familiar scent of paper and aged wood welcoming him like an old friend. He didn't see Isabel. A young clerk greeted him, distracted by stalking a nearby shelf. Keanu gave a gentle smile and walked to the counter. He set the envelope down, pausing to make sure it wouldn't slide off. Then he turned and left. He didn't ask if Isabel was there. He didn't wait to be seen. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk as he slid his hands into his coat pockets and walked away. He didn't know if she'd read the letter, or tear it up, or leave it unopened forever. But he had written it, and that, for now, was enough. That afternoon, he returned to the park where they'd first met, the same bench, the same willow tree. He brought a book and sat in the cool shade, letting the silence speak what he could no longer say. He didn't expect anything. He just waited. The days turned colder. Keanu extended his stay by another week, then another. His assistant called twice to check in, offering to rearrange meetings and press events. He declined, gently. He wasn't ready to leave Portland. Not yet. Each morning he'd walk the same path to the park, coffee in hand, sometimes sitting for hours, sometimes walking in slow loops. Isabel's sketchbook remained tucked in his bag, a quiet reminder of hope and hurt stitched together. There was no reply, no text, no call, and still he stayed. Some nights he replayed their brief conversations in his head. Her voice, her questions, the way her eyes narrowed when something didn't sit right. He wondered what she thought when she read the letter, if she'd read it at all. And if she did it hurt? Did it heal? Or both? He didn't ask. He didn't reach out again. He let the silence breathe, as much for her as for himself. And in that silence, he realized something. Love wasn't about timing, or certainty, or even being ready. It was about showing up and staying put. Even when the door didn't open again. Even when it might never. It happened on a Thursday evening. Keanu was sitting in the lobby of his hotel, sipping tea, the fire from the hearth flickering across the marble floor. He wasn't waiting for anything specific, just winding down another quiet day. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. No contact name, just a number, but the area code was local. His heart skipped. He opened the message. Just one word. Dinner? That was it. No explanation. No apology. No punctuation. But it was hers. He stared at the screen, reading the word over and over. His hands trembled slightly as he replied. When and where? The response came seconds later. Same park, tomorrow, 6 p.m. He didn't smile, not quite. But he exhaled, a breath he hadn't known he'd been holding for weeks. And in that moment, something inside him settled. She didn't owe him a second chance, but she was offering one anyway. And for Keanu Reeves, that was everything. The next morning, Keanu woke before dawn. He didn't need an alarm. His body knew. He showered, shaved, and dressed carefully, not in anything flashy, just a soft button-up and dark jeans. Something simple, something human. He walked to the park early and waited, bringing with him a single folded page, the sketch from her book. He'd kept it, carried it, memorized every line. At 6 p.m. on the dot, she arrived. Same coat, same eyes, but something was different. There was less armor in the way she stood, less tension in her stride. She gave him a small nod. I'm hungry, she said. He smiled. Me too. They walked down the block to a quiet diner lit with golden lamps and jazz playing softly from an old speaker. No one noticed them. Not as actor and daughter. Just as two people trying to mend a broken line. Over burgers and fries, she asked him questions. Real ones. About Lily. About why he never had kids. About who he thought he'd be by this point in life. He answered honestly. Because when someone finally opens a door for you, you don't waste time pretending to be anyone else. When the check came, Isabel reached for it without hesitation. Keanu laughed softly and let her. I'm not fragile, she said, smirking. No, you're not, he agreed, with pride in his voice. They stepped back into the evening air. The moon was rising above the rooftops, full and soft, like a promise. At the corner where they'd part, she paused. Then, without warning, she hugged him. It wasn't long. It wasn't tight. But it was real. Keanu didn't move for a while after she walked away. He stood there, hands in his pockets, heart full of something he didn't have a name for yet. Hope, maybe. Or grace. When he got back to his hotel, he placed the sketch on the desk and added one more line at the bottom. A note just for him. Still here. And now, maybe, so was she. The diner was quiet, tucked between a laundromat and an old hardware store, its neon sign flickering against the glass like a heartbeat unsure of its rhythm. Keanu held the door open and Isabel stepped inside without a word. The booth they chose was near the back, far from the windows, dimly lit. It felt like the right kind of quiet. A waitress approached and dropped off menus. Keanu gave a polite nod. Isabel scanned the laminated pages without really reading. They ordered quickly, 2 burgers, fries, water for her, tea for him. Then came the silence. Not uncomfortable, just full. Keanu watched her, trying not to overstep. She wasn't a child. She was someone who had built armor 1 layer at a time. Every question had weight. Every answer had consequence. Isabel finally broke the stillness. "Why didn't you ever look for us?" It was blunt, honest, heavy. Keanu didn't flinch. "I didn't know you existed," he said. "You didn't suspect? Not even a little?" "I wish I had. I replay it over and over. Lily never said goodbye. I thought, maybe she just didn't want me in her life anymore. I never imagined it had anything to do with you." Isabel stirred her water with her straw, eyes lowered. "She said you were kind, and strange, but kind." Keanu gave a quiet laugh. "That sounds like her." "What were you like back then?" she asked, not quite looking at him. He leaned back, searching his memory. Lost. A little selfish. Not malicious, just trying to figure life out. "I didn't always know how to show up for people." "Did you love her?" "I think so," he said, "but not in a forever way. It was brief, honest. She challenged me. She saw parts of me I hadn't met yet." Their food arrived. Steam curled up from the fries. Neither of them touched the plates. Isabel finally reached for a fry. "Why do you want to know me now?" Keanu didn't rush the answer. "Because you exist, and that matters. And because no one should go through life not knowing they're wanted." Isabel nodded slowly. She was quiet for a long time. Then she looked up. "Do you regret not having kids?" Keanu didn't hesitate. "I do now." The words hung between them, heavier than the silence before. And Isabel, despite herself, smiled for the first time. Isabel pushed her plate aside and folded her arms on the table. "She never talked about you?" she said. "Not really. Just once, when I was 11. I asked who my dad was. She said you were someone she once trusted. But that was it." Keanu's heart tightened. "I wish she had told me. I would have—" "But she didn't," Isabel interrupted. "So what does that mean?" He met her gaze. "I don't know. Maybe she thought she was protecting you. Or herself. Maybe she was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid I'd let you both down. Or that I wouldn't believe her. Or that I'd disappear again." "You think she stopped believing in people?" "I think," he said slowly, "she believed in you more than she believed in anything else." Isabel looked away. Outside the diner window, a couple walked by with a toddler between them, holding both their hands. Isabel's eyes lingered on the sight, then returned to Keanu. "Do you really want to do this?" she asked. "Be part of my life now?" He nodded. "Only if you want me to. But I'm not going anywhere." Isabel's eyes softened. She didn't respond. But she didn't leave either. Keanu reached for a fry and dipped it in ketchup. "Just so you know," he said, "I'm terrible at texting. You might get responses 3 days late." Isabel let out a surprised laugh. Bad. "Worse," he said, smiling. "But I'm great with letters." She tilted her head. "Old school." "I respect that." The mood shifted, just slightly. Something lighter crept in. Keanu leaned forward. "Tell me something about you, something I wouldn't guess." Isabel thought for a moment. "I hate peanut butter." He feigned shock. "What? That's a crime in some states." "And I read 3 books at once." "That sounds exhausting." "It's like switching lives whenever I want." He nodded with admiration. "That's a superpower." For a moment, they weren't actor and daughter. They were just 2 people discovering something new, something that felt like possibility. When the check arrived, Isabel reached for it again. "I've got this one." Keanu raised a brow. "We splitting the next one?" She smiled. "We'll see." They walked outside into the cool evening air. The night felt softer, more forgiving. And as they reached the sidewalk, Isabel stopped, looked at him and said, I think I want to know you. It was the beginning. They strolled down the block together, the city dimming into quiet pockets of light. Isabel kept her hands in her jacket pockets, shoulders tucked forward, as if trying to stay small. Keanu glanced over. Do you still draw? She nodded. Every day, not just people. I draw buildings, trees, moments. Moments? Yeah, like someone looking out a bus window, or a dog waiting at a crosswalk. Things people usually miss. He smiled. You notice things. I try to. They passed a mural painted on the side of an old bookstore. A swirl of color, chaos, and quiet faces. Isabel stopped to study it. I did that one, she said. Keanu blinked. You painted this? Last year. They paid me in used books and coffee. It's beautiful, he said. She shrugged. It's messy. It's alive, he replied. They kept walking. When they reached the corner near her shelter, she paused. You really want to be in my life? He looked her in the eyes. If you'll have me? She studied him a long time. I don't know how this works. Me neither, he said, but maybe we figure it out. She nodded. Okay. One step at a time. And they kept walking. That night, Keanu sat in his hotel room with the window cracked open. The city murmured outside, buses sighing at red lights, distant laughter from passing strangers, the hum of neon. But in his mind, all he could hear was her voice. I want to know you. He repeated it in his head like a prayer, like a gift. He picked up the sketch she'd once given him and placed it gently in his journal. Then, he opened a fresh page and began to write. Not a letter this time, but thoughts. How strange it was to feel everything at once. Joy, guilt, grief. He wrote, It's not the years we miss that define us. It's what we do with the years ahead. He paused, then added, And I won't miss another one. The next morning, he stopped by the bookstore again, not to look for her, but to buy a book, a small poetry collection she'd once mentioned. He left a note tucked inside it at the register. No pressure. Just this. Let's keep walking. He signed it with his name, just his name, and left quietly. And somewhere in the city, a young woman smiled, without knowing why, because healing had begun. Keanu stood outside the bookstore again, a paper bag in one hand and his phone in the other. He didn't go inside this time. He just texted, Want to hang out today? No pressure, just walk. A few minutes passed. Then came the reply, Sure, wait. He smiled and typed quickly, Pick you up in 30. When Isabel slid into the passenger seat of his black SUV, she looked relaxed, sweatshirt, jeans, hair tied back. She didn't ask where they were going. She just glanced at the bag on his lap and said, That? For me. He nodded and handed it over. Inside was a blueberry muffin and a small poetry zine he'd found in the indie section. She unwrapped the muffin and took a bite. Points for effort, she mumbled through a mouthful. They drove out of the city toward the coast. The conversation was light. Favorite bands, strange coffee orders, a memory about a jellyfish sting he once got during filming in Hawaii. She laughed more than she had the first 2 times they'd met. Eventually, the city gave way to winding cliffs and ocean mist. They stopped at a small overlook, just high enough to see the horizon ripple against the sky. After a short walk and a few shared photos of the coastline, Keanu turned the car inland again. Mind a detour? He asked. Isabel shrugged. Lead the way. An hour later, they pulled into a quiet lot nestled in the hills. A film set, but not the kind Isabel had imagined. No chaos, no shouting directors, just a skeleton crew prepping for a small indie project he'd agreed to support. Keanu greeted the crew with quiet nods and polite hellos, never calling attention to himself. Isabel stayed close, observing. One of the camera operators offered her a coffee. Another invited her to peek behind the monitor. She wandered toward the soundstage and watched a scene unfold. 2 actors standing in silence, wind moving through an open window behind them. No action, no fight choreography, just presence. Keanu joined her. "This one's about memory," he said. "Two people who remember the same moment differently." She watched, then turned to him. "That feels familiar." He smiled, a little sad. Yeah. No one asked who she was. No one pointed. She wasn't Keanu Reeves' daughter. She was just Isabel. And for the first time, it didn't feel like she had to prove. She belonged. They left the studio just before sunset. Keanu drove to a quiet stretch of coastline, far from tourists, where the cliffs sloped down to a sandy crescent. He opened the back of the SUV, and a large, shaggy mutt bounded out. "Meet Zeus," Keanu said. "He doesn't bite unless you're a seagull." Isabel knelt down and scratched the dog behind the ears. Zeus immediately flopped onto his back. "Drama queen," she said. They walked the beach slowly, barefoot, shoes dangling from their hands. The tide was low, sea foam clung to their toes as they moved through the wet sand. "You always have this much free time?" Isabel asked. He grinned. "Not always, but I make time for what matters." She nodded, thoughtful. Zeus darted ahead, chasing waves and failing, then returning for praise he hadn't earned. Keanu picked up a piece of driftwood, handed it to Isabel. "Want to see something ridiculous?" He whistled. Zeus stood at attention. Isabel tossed the stick, and the dog launched after it like a bullet, sliding comically on the wet sand when he stopped short. They laughed together, and the sound didn't feel foreign anymore. It felt normal. It felt good, like something they could do again. That evening, back at Keanu's home, things remained quiet. He'd offered the guest room, but Isabel had curled up on the living room couch with a blanket and a book instead. The fireplace crackled softly. Zeus snored on the rug. Keanu sat in the armchair, legs stretched out, flipping through a script he'd been meaning to read for weeks, but he wasn't really focused on it. Every so often, he glanced at Isabel. She wasn't reading anymore, just staring at the pages, thumb rubbing the corner of one dog-eared page. Her eyes were distant, but not guarded, just... "I used to imagine what your house looked like," she said quietly. Keanu set the script aside. "And? I pictured glass walls and a koi pond. You know, famous actor stuff." He chuckled. "I've got a leaky roof and a broken toaster. Don't tell the tabloids." She smiled, then her voice dropped. "I used to wonder what it'd be like if I'd known you sooner." Fuck, he didn't move. "Me too," he said. Her eyes closed slowly. She didn't reply. 10 minutes later, she was asleep, book open on her chest. Keanu rose, gently pulled the blanket up over her shoulders, and turned off the light. He paused in the hallway, one hand resting on the doorframe. A quiet exhale left his lips. Something had shifted. It wasn't big, it wasn't loud, but it was real. And in the stillness of that moment, he allowed himself the smallest hope that this was the start of something lasting. The next morning, they sat across from each other at the kitchen table, toast and eggs between them, but barely touched. The early light filtered in through gauzy curtains, and Zeus snored at Keanu's feet. Keanu sipped his coffee slowly, eyes on the rim of the mug. Then he looked up. "Can I ask something a little weird?" Isabel, who'd been stirring honey into her tea, paused. "Weirder than the past few weeks?" He smiled gently. "Fair, but I was thinking, maybe we should do a test." Her brow furrowed. "A test?" "A DNA test," he said, carefully. "Not because I doubt anything. I don't. I believe you. I believe her. But sometimes people need closure, something tangible, for themselves." She was quiet. Keanu added, "Only if you want. I'm not trying to make this clinical." Isabel leaned back in her chair. "I hadn't even thought about it. I guess I've just been going with what felt true." He nodded. "Me too." She considered it for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "Okay. Yeah, let's do it." It wasn't distrust. It wasn't fear. It was a shared breath. a way to make permanent what was already beginning to feel undeniable. Later that afternoon, they drove to a small clinic tucked between a dentist's office and a dry cleaner. No red carpet, no VIP entrance. Just a quiet receptionist with kind eyes who handed them 2 small swabs and a clipboard of consent forms. Isabel filled hers out quickly. Keanu took longer, staring at the lines like they held more than legal jargon. The nurse gave simple instructions, swabbed the inside of their cheeks, sealed the envelopes. "That's it?" Isabel asked. The nurse nodded. "Now we wait. A few days. You'll get an email." Keanu thanked her and held the door open for Isabel. Outside, the sky was heavy with the scent of impending rain. They didn't speak as they walked to the car. That night, back home, Isabel curled up with a blanket and her sketchbook. She didn't draw. She just flipped through older pages, as if trying to find something she'd forgotten. Keanu didn't push. He made tea and joined her on the couch, letting the silence fill the room like a lullaby. They didn't need to speak. Not yet. Waiting didn't have to feel like suspense. Sometimes it was the quiet that made things real. 2 nights later, as the wind howled gently outside and thunder threatened somewhere in the distance, Isabel placed a worn, leather-bound journal on the kitchen counter. "I've been meaning to show you this," she said. Keanu looked up from his mug. The journal looked like it had traveled through storms. Frayed edges, coffee stains, pages curling at the corners. "My mom kept this for years. She didn't write in it every day, but when she did, it was always real." Keanu ran his fingers over the cracked cover. Isabel flipped to a bookmarked page near the back. This entry was dated 2 weeks before she passed. She pushed it toward him. He adjusted his glasses and began to read aloud, his voice slow, steady. "If Keanu ever finds her, tell him she has his eyes. She bites her lip when she's nervous, just like he did. And she closes her door too loudly when she's angry, also like him." His voice cracked. He paused. "Tell him, I never meant to disappear. I just didn't know how to ask for help. And I wanted her to grow up strong, not waiting for someone who might never come." He lowered the book, his hands trembling. Isabel said nothing. She didn't have to. Keanu sat down slowly at the table, journal still in hand. He turned the page and read more entries, some short, some winding. One detailed Isabel's 6th birthday, how she'd cried over a crushed cupcake but smiled when her mom drew her a dragon instead. Another entry, dated years later, described Lily watching Isabel sleep after a night of nightmares. "She fights in her dreams," Lily had written, "but wakes up softer. I hope the world doesn't take that away from her." Isabel stared at the table, her fingers curled around a tea mug that had long gone cold. She was afraid of people leaving, she said. Her own father walked out when she was a teenager. She never forgave him. I think that fear stayed in her bones. Keanu closed the journal and looked at her. "I wish she'd told me. I wish she'd given me a chance." Isabel looked up. "You have one now." A long silence settled between them. But it wasn't empty. It was full of breath, weight, and something like peace. Keanu placed the journal gently in the center of the table. Then he reached for her hand, and this time, she didn't pull away. The email arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. Keanu was in the kitchen making omelets when he heard Isabel's phone buzz against the counter. She picked it up, glanced at the screen, then looked at him. "It's here," she said. He turned off the stove. Time stilled. She opened the message with a single tap. Silence. Then her hand moved to cover her mouth. Keanu walked over slowly. She turned the screen toward him. 99.99% match. He read the words again, then again. Neither of them spoke. Isabel's eyes filled first, not with shock, but with something deeper. Relief, sadness, hope, tangled into one. Keanu reached out, gently took the phone, set it on the counter, and wrapped his arms around her. She didn't hesitate. She leaned in, fully. He felt her shoulders tremble. "I didn't need a number," she whispered, "but I'm glad it's there." Keanu nodded against her hair. Me too. They stood there for minutes, not moving. The rain tapping the windows, the stove cooling, the air between them finally weightless. Eventually, Isabel pulled back, wiped her cheeks with her sleeve, and gave a small, crooked smile. You really do have terrible posture, she said. He laughed through tears. Later that day, they sat on the back patio with mugs of warm cider, wrapped in thick blankets as the rain turned to mist. I keep thinking about what she wrote, Keanu said quietly. That you have my eyes. Isabel looked down at her cup. I used to hate my eyes. Boy, because they weren't hers, they weren't like anyone I knew. She paused. Now, I think maybe they weren't meant to be. Keanu glanced over. They're yours. That's what matters. She didn't speak for a while. Then, I'm scared. Of what? Of letting you in, and then losing you. Keanu looked straight at her. I'm not going anywhere. She gave a tight nod. Okay. Zeus wandered over and placed his head on Isabel's lap, sighing contentedly. She scratched behind his ears. Keanu smiled. He likes you. Has terrible taste, she said with a smirk. They both laughed again, softer this time, but from the same honest place. The storm had passed, inside and out. Not everything was fixed, but something had been named, and naming a thing, sometimes, was the first step toward healing. That evening, Keanu took out a framed photo he'd kept tucked away, an old snapshot from the 90s. It was him and Lily smiling under a street lamp outside a diner in Vancouver. The colors had faded, but the warmth was still there. He showed it to Isabel. She carried this photo in her wallet until the day she died, Isabel said softly. I only found it afterward. I didn't understand why she kept it. Keanu's fingers traced the edge of the frame. She remembered, he murmured. She remembered everything, Isabel echoed. Even when she couldn't speak anymore, she'd tap that photo, like it was her way of saying something still mattered. Keanu placed the photo on the fireplace mantel. No fanfare, no announcement. Just presence. Let's keep her in the room, he said. Isabel nodded. She'd like that. Before bed, Keanu opened the journal again. He wrote something on the last page, beneath Lily's final entry. Not an explanation, not a promise. Just this. I found her. Then he closed the book, set it beside the photo, and turned off the light. The next morning, Isabel placed her tea beside the journal and stared out the window as sunlight broke through the clouds. I think I want to stay a while, she said. Keanu, standing in the doorway, gave a quiet nod. No rush, he said. This is your home too if you want it. She didn't answer right away. She just smiled, a little more like her mother than before, and went back to sipping her tea. And for the first time, Keanu didn't feel like a man fixing a past. He felt like a father, right here in the present. It started with a drive through the older neighborhoods of Portland. Keanu didn't tell anyone what he was doing. Not his assistant, not his agent. It was something he had to do alone. He wore a beanie and sunglasses, blending into the background, just another man in a rental car cruising through streets lined with trees and memories. Isabel was still sleeping back at the rental house. They'd spent the last few days getting used to the quiet rhythm between them. She had her routines. He gave her space. But he noticed the way she folded her clothes so carefully in her duffel bag each morning. How she tucked the toothbrush. She didn't believe anything could last. He wanted to change that, not with speeches or promises, but with something real, something that had a key. He toured 7 homes in 1 week. Most were too big, too polished, too Portland chic. Isabel didn't need marble countertops or mood lighting. She needed light, space, quiet corners to draw in, and a door that locked only when she wanted it to. The one he chose sat on a quiet cul-de-sac, nestled between 2 modest homes with chipped paint and overgrown gardens. He was a 2-bedroom craftsman, built in the 1000s, 950s, with creaky floors and a small porch swing that tilted slightly to the left. The siding needed repainting, but the bones were good. It had a bay window in the front room, a kitchen just big enough to feel like home, and a spare room that could easily become an art studio. He walked through it twice before making the call. "We'll take it," he told the realtor, then paused. "Actually, she will." Within a week, painters refreshed the walls with warm tones, moss green in the reading nook, sunflower yellow in the hallway. The floors were polished but left imperfect, just like the house itself. Then came the books. Keanu spent 2 nights handpicking every title on the shelf: poetry, graphic novels, first editions of classics, a few blank journals. One copy of a children's book he'd found in her sketchpad drawings, dog-eared and worn. He left the top shelf empty. That space, he decided, would be hers to fill. When it was done, he stood in the middle of the living room and exhaled. It wasn't extravagant. It was enough. The next morning, Keanu invited Isabel out for coffee. "No agenda," he said casually. "Just want to show you something." She eyed him with mock suspicion. "You're being weird." "I'm always weird," he replied. They drove through the neighborhood in comfortable silence. Isabel pointed out a mural of a cat wearing sunglasses. "That's been there forever," she said. "I used to walk past it on my way to school." Keanu filed that away. When they pulled into the driveway of the little house, Isabel frowned. "What is this?" He didn't answer right away, just walked to the porch, pulled a small envelope from his jacket and handed it to her. Inside was a brass key. Her fingers trembled slightly as she looked from the envelope to him. "Keanu." "Go ahead," he said, voice gentle. She stepped up slowly, unlocking the door. It creaked open with a soft groan, revealing warm light, polished floors, and bookshelves that lined the wall beside the window. She walked inside like she was afraid to touch anything. The air smelled like cedar and lavender. When she reached the bookshelf and saw the titles, some with notes tucked inside, her breath caught. She turned around. "You did this?" Keanu nodded. "It's yours, if you want it." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer, her fingers brushing the spines of books, tracing the light switch, running over the windowsill, like she was trying to convince herself it wasn't a dream. "I don't," her voice faltered. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Keanu said softly. "But why?" she whispered. "You barely know me." He stepped forward, slowly, like one wrong move might break the moment. "Because you deserve a place where you're not temporary, not someone's guest, not between shelters. A place that's yours, with your books, your drawings, your music, your life." She looked down at the key still in her hand. "I'm not trying to fix everything," he added, "and you don't owe me anything. But if this helps you stand taller, breathe deeper, then it's worth it." Her eyes welled, and this time, when she moved toward him, there was no hesitation. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face into his shoulder. He held her, arms strong. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not trying to save me, for seeing me." Keanu blinked back tears. "You've always been worth seeing." After the hug faded into a quiet stillness, Isabel wandered deeper into the house. She found the second bedroom. Small, but with north-facing light and a wide desk under the window. A few art supplies had been placed neatly in the corner. Pencils, watercolors, blank canvases stacked beside a stool. She stood there for a long time. Keanu leaned on the doorway. "You don't have to use it," he said, "or you can paint over everything." She smiled, turning back to him. "I haven't had a room with a window in 4 years." She explored the kitchen next. Modest, clean, but personal. On the counter sat a small tin box labeled "Tea and Wishes." Inside were dozens of individually wrapped tea bags, each labeled with a small handwritten quote. Isabel pulled one out and read it. "Hope is a quiet thing," she read aloud. "You wrote these?" Keanu shrugged. "Had help." She laughed. "Full and real. This is insane." "You're insane." "I get that a lot." Back in the living room, she settled on the couch, hugging a throw pillow to her chest. "I've never had anything that was just mine," she whispered. "You do now," Keanu said, "and no one can take it from you." That night, they stayed. Keanu ordered takeout from a small Thai place down the street, and they ate cross-legged on the floor, laughing over uneven chopsticks and too spicy noodles. Zeus padded around the house, sniffing every corner like he was inspecting the perimeter of a new kingdom. When dinner was done, Isabel lit a few candles she'd found in a drawer and dimmed the lights. Keanu put on an old record he'd brought along. Soft jazz, the kind that didn't demand attention but welcomed you home. They sat in the living room, shoes off, music playing low. "I used to imagine what a night like this would feel like," Isabel said, voice barely above a whisper. Not big, not dramatic, just safe. Keanu leaned back on his elbows, eyes closed. "Me too." She looked over. "Really?" "Yeah. After my sister got sick, I stopped picturing the future. Nights like this, they became rare. But they're the ones that stick." She nodded, holding that thought. Later, as the record crackled to silence, Keanu handed her a small notebook. Inside, he'd written one line on the first page. "This house doesn't need rules," it read. "Only dreams." She smiled, clutching it like a passport. The next morning, Keanu woke early and found Isabel outside on the porch, wrapped in a quilt, sketching. She didn't notice him at first. Her pencil moved quickly, with purpose, lines becoming forms, forms becoming characters. He stood quietly at the screen door, watching her. She finally glanced back. "Caught me." He smiled. "I was hoping to." She held up the sketchbook. On the page was a girl sitting on a porch swing, barefoot, hair blowing in the wind. The house behind her looked strikingly familiar. "I think I'm going to start a new story," she said. "A real one." "I'd read it," he said. "You kind of already are," she replied, grinning. He stepped outside, the morning chill brushing against his arms. The sun was beginning to rise, casting gold across the quiet street. "You know," he said after a moment, "this house, it's not about bricks or bookshelves." She looked at him, curious. "It's about what it means to finally stop running," he said, "and to know someone believes in you enough to build something solid around you." She set the sketchbook down, got up, and hugged him again. This time without words, without hesitation. Before they went back inside, Isabel walked over to the porch swing and sat down. She rocked gently, eyes closed, face lifted toward the sun. Keanu leaned on the railing, watching her in silence. This, he thought, was all he ever wanted, for her to feel rooted, for her to breathe freely. Not because he was her father, but because she was his daughter. And from that moment on, she knew it too. The invitation came on thick cardstock with gold-embossed lettering and the name of the film Keanu had quietly wrapped the year before. The premiere would be in Los Angeles. Black tie, red carpet, flashbulbs and interviews. A spectacle, a celebration. He didn't plan on going. But then, one morning, as he and Isabel sat at the kitchen table, sipping their usual mugs of tea, she looked up from her sketchbook and asked, "What's the weirdest event you've ever had to go to?" Keanu chuckled. "There was one screening in Berlin. Someone released a pigeon into the theater during the credits. That was pretty high on the list." Isabel laughed, her eyes bright. "You really live in a different world." He studied her for a moment. How she curled her knees under the chair, how her pencil smudged her fingertips, how the light hit the strands of her hair, just like it had in the sketch she showed him weeks ago. "You could come with me," he said softly. She blinked. "To what?" "The premiere of the new movie, if you want to." She went still. "Are you serious?" He nodded. "But only if you want to." And, the way she looked down, shy, surprised, honored, told him everything. They spent the next few days talking about everything but the premiere. It wasn't nerves, exactly, more like awe. Like Isabel was waiting for someone to tap her on the shoulder and say the invitation wasn't real. Keanu never pushed, he just let her sit with it. One afternoon, she wandered into a thrift store on Hawthorne and found the dress. It was simple, dark burgundy velvet, long sleeves, vintage cut, and a neckline just wide enough to feel elegant. She stared at it for a long time before reaching out to touch the fabric. "This reminds me of something," she whispered. Later that night, she pulled out one of her mother's old photo albums. On the third page was a black and white picture of Lily in a dress almost exactly like it, arms thrown around a group of friends, laughter frozen in time. She didn't cry, but she closed the album gently, then laid the dress across the bed. "This one," she said to Keanu. "I want this one." He didn't ask why. He just nodded. And the next morning, the dress was at the tailor's. No logo, no stylist. Just Isabel and a garment that belonged to a memory. The flight to Los Angeles was quiet. Keanu booked a private plane, not for luxury, but for calm. Isabel had never flown before. She pressed her nose to the window during takeoff, watching clouds swallow the earth. "Does it always feel like this?" she asked. "Not always," Keanu replied. "But the first time, it's magic." She didn't speak for a while, just stared out the window, her sketchbook on her lap, untouched. When they landed, a car waited to take them to a modest guest house tucked away in the hills. Not a hotel, not a... The night before the premiere, Keanu cooked pasta. They ate outside, string lights above them, and a breeze warm enough to keep the sweaters off their shoulders. "You don't have to go if it feels like too much," he said, as they finished their plates. She looked at him, her eyes steady. "I want to go, I want to do it right." "You already are." He meant it. And when she stepped inside, holding her dress like a precious secret, he knew she was ready, not for the cameras, but for the moment. On the night of the premiere, the house felt sacred. Isabel dressed slowly, carefully, as though each step carried meaning. She wore simple black flats, no makeup except for a touch of rose gloss, and a small locket that had belonged to her mother. In the mirror, she didn't see a girl from a shelter. She saw someone stepping into herself. Keanu waited outside the guest room in a tailored black suit, hands in his pockets, staring at the wall like it held answers. When she stepped out, he looked up and froze. His throat tightened, not because she looked glamorous, but because she looked whole. She smiled shyly. "Is it too much?" He shook his head. "No, it's perfect." The car ride was quiet. Isabel held the locket in her hand, fingers curled gently around it. As they neared the venue, the lights began to appear, bright, pulsing, alive. Camera crews lined the red carpet, reporters angled for shots. It was every bit the chaos she imagined it would be. She turned to him. "Will you walk with me?" He offered his arm. "Always," he said. And when they stepped out into the lights, she didn't let go. The cameras flashed like lightning. But Isabel didn't flinch. She stood beside Keanu, holding his arm, shoulders back. She didn't wave or pose. She just looked around, soaking it in. This moment that didn't belong to headlines or gossip columns. It belonged to her. One of the photographers leaned over a barrier and asked, "Who's this lovely young lady, Keanu?" He looked at Isabel. "This is Isabel." Nothing more, nothing less. Isabel turned toward him, eyes shining. "I'm proud to be yours," she whispered, barely audible over the crowd. Keanu's jaw tightened. His eyes misted. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "I always was," he whispered back. They didn't stop for interviews, didn't linger for attention. Once inside, they found their seats and waited for the lights to dim. Before the movie started, Isabel leaned in and said, "My mom would have loved this." "I think she does," Keanu replied. And for the first time in years, he felt peace in a place full of noise. Not because of the film, not because of the crowd, but because she was there, and because she knew now, without question, that she belonged. Later that night, Keanu walked out onto the porch and looked up at the sky. Stars blinked through the city haze, distant but present. He thought about everything that had led to this moment. The letter without a stamp, the bookstore in Portland, the sketches, the silences, the pain, the healing. All of it had brought them here. Not as strangers linked by blood, but as two souls who found their way back to each other through something deeper. Choice. She had chosen to trust him, and he had chosen to stay. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the folded invitation to the premiere, the gold lettering now slightly bent from the night. On the back, he scribbled a few words in pencil before tucking it into the inside cover of her sketchbook. You were the premiere. Then he went inside, quietly, letting the door click shut behind him like a final scene fading to black. No more waiting, no more wondering. She was home, and so was he. It was a quiet afternoon when Isabel handed Keanu the tape recorder. No ceremony, no speech, just a small plastic device wrapped gently in a faded scarf. They were sitting on the back porch of the Portland house, the one he'd bought her. The sun had begun to set, streaks of orange casting long shadows across the wooden deck. Zeus lay at their feet, tail flicking lazily in the breeze. Isabel didn't say much. She just placed the recorder in his hand and whispered, "It's from my mom." Keanu looked down at it. It was an old model, the kind with physical buttons that clicked when pressed. A tiny label sat beneath the rewind switch. Autumn tapes. I haven't listened to it in years, Isabel added, almost apologetically. She recorded some of it near the end. I used to play it when I couldn't sleep. Keanu held the device carefully, like it might break or vanish if he gripped too hard. Are you sure? He asked gently. Isabel nodded. She left it for you too. You'll understand when you hear it. Then she got up, kissed him on the head, and walked back inside, leaving him with the last voice of a woman he never stopped remembering. That night, long after Isabel had gone to bed, Keanu sat in the small reading room of the house. A lamp glowed beside him, casting golden light over the armchair. The tape recorder sat on his lap, heavy with memory. He pressed play. There was a pause, then the faint crackle of static. And finally, her voice. Testing. Okay, I think this is working now. I never liked talking to machines, but I suppose this is the closest thing I have left to a conversation. Keanu inhaled sharply. Lily's voice was softer than he remembered, tinged with fatigue but still layered with warmth. It poured through the air like a forgotten melody. Isabel's sleeping, the voice continued. She had a rough day. Sometimes I look at her and wonder how I ever created something so strong. She doesn't know it yet, but she's going to be okay. I can feel it. Keanu leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped. His heartbeat echoed in his ears. I've been thinking about him lately, Lily said. About Keanu. The recorder clicked gently as the tape moved. I never told him, not because I was afraid of him, because I loved him. And sometimes love makes you want to protect someone, from the world and from yourself. Keanu closed his eyes. The voice continued, fragile yet unshaken. I used to wonder if I did the right thing, keeping her from him. But some nights, when I watched Isabel sleep, I'd tell myself she was safe, and maybe that was enough. There was a pause, then the faint sound of Lily's breath, as if she were holding back tears. But it wasn't enough. Not really, because now time is running out, and there are things I need to say. Keanu sat still, the ache in his chest spreading like ink in water. I never wanted her to feel abandoned, Lily said, and I never wanted you to feel like I left without a reason. You were kind, Keanu, so kind. You never judged me. You saw me, and maybe I couldn't face the possibility that I'd lose that if I gave you more. Another pause. If you're listening to this, if somehow this made it into your hands, I want you to know something. Keanu's eyes opened. He stared at the spinning wheels of the recorder. You were never alone. The tape crackled softly. Not when she was born, not when she smiled for the first time, not when she asked who her father was. You were always there, in spirit, in memory, in every bedtime story I ever told. Keanu pressed his hand over his mouth, eyes burning. The tape rolled on. Sometimes I imagined you two meeting someday. Maybe she'd bump into you at a bookstore, Or you'd see her sketching in a park, and something would click. Silly, right? But it helped me sleep. A soft laugh escaped from the recording, weak but real. She has your eyes, Keanu, your way of being quiet without disappearing. She listens more than she speaks, and when she smiles, God, it's like watching sunlight crack through a storm. Keanu let out a shaky breath. I know I'm not going to make it to her graduation, or to her first heartbreak, or the first time she tells someone she's scared. Another pause, then Lily's voice, lower now. But I hope, if you're there, she won't have to go through it alone. The tape clicked slightly, then continued. I don't need anything from you. No apologies, no explanations, just love her. The way you would have if you'd known. The way I know you still can. There was a long silence, just the hum of the tape spinning, and then Lily whispered, You're both so much more than I ever gave you credit for. Keanu wiped his cheek, tears spilling freely now. The recording grew softer, as if Lily had shifted in her chair. Tell her I'm sorry, for all of it. But tell her more than that. Tell her I loved her. Every day, with every breath I had left. Keanu sat forward, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. I want her to draw, to make things, to trust her instincts, to forgive, to laugh without guilt. A small cough interrupted the words, then a deep breath. And Keanu, don't forget who you are. Don't let this world harden you. You were always the kindest man I knew. I hope that part of you never changed. The final few seconds of the recording held nothing but the soft scrape of a chair leg and Lily's voice one last time. You were never alone, she whispered again. You were just waiting to meet each other. Then the tape stopped. Click. Keanu didn't move. Not for a long time. The silence in the room was full of everything he could no longer say to her, and everything he still might say to Isabel. Eventually he reached down, pressed rewind, and let it play again from the beginning. Because some voices shouldn't fade after one goodbye. The next morning the kettle whistled softly in the kitchen. Isabel stepped in, barefoot, her sweater sleeves pulled past her hands. She paused when she saw Keanu sitting at the table, the tape recorder beside him, eyes red but clear. He didn't say anything right away, just poured her tea and passed it across the table. I listened to it, he said softly. Isabel sat, folding her arms over the warm mug. What did you think? He looked down at the recorder, then back at her. She loved you more than anything, he said, and she never stopped thinking of both of us. Isabel's eyes filled, but she nodded. She said you were kind, Isabel whispered. I don't know if I was. Not the way I could have been. She forgave you. I think she forgave herself, too. They sat in silence again, sipping quietly. I used to fall asleep listening to her talk, Isabel said after a moment. Even after she was gone, her voice made it feel like I wasn't alone. Keanu reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. You weren't. She gripped his fingers, and for the first time, he felt no hesitation in her touch. Only understanding. And peace. Later that afternoon, Keanu walked into the guest room with a small wooden box tucked under his arm. Isabel looked up from her sketch pad as he set it on the table beside her. What's this? She asked. He smiled gently. Something I've kept for a long time. I didn't know why until now. She opened the box slowly. Inside was a stack of letters, old, yellowing with age. Photographs from a film set. A folded piece of paper with a quick sketch of a woman smiling beneath a tree, and at the very bottom, a tiny cassette tape labeled, Screen Test, Lily J. Isabel touched it like it was made of glass. I kept this after we lost touch, Keanu said. She gave it to me when she auditioned, said she didn't think she'd get the part, but wanted to be remembered anyway. He sat beside her, watching her fingertips run across her mother's name. I think she knew somehow, he said. Isabel nodded slowly. I want to watch it, with you. They sat on the couch that evening, side by side, the box between them. 2 tapes, 2 stories. and a love that had waited years to be heard, and finally was. Together. The sky over the Oregon coast was a quiet shade of blue-gray, the kind that wrapped everything in a soft hush. It was Isabel's birthday. She'd turned 18 that morning with no balloons, no big plans, no gifts wrapped in glossy paper. Just the slow waves against the shore, a slight breeze curling through her hair, and Keanu beside her, holding a thermos of hot tea between them. "This isn't what I pictured when I thought of turning 18, she said with a half smile. Keanu tilted his head. "Good different or bad different?" She looked out toward the water. "I think peaceful different." They sat on a checkered blanket that had seen better days. A small portable speaker played quiet instrumental music while Zeus chased the surf down the shoreline, barking with occasional joy. No one else was around. Keanu had found this spot years ago, hidden just beyond a line of dunes and driftwood. It wasn't marked on any map. That made it perfect. Isabel closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the salty air. "I used to hate my birthday," she said softly. "Mom would try to make it special, but something always felt missing." Keanu didn't respond right away. He just poured more tea into her cup and waited. After a while, Keanu reached into his canvas bag and pulled out a small tablet. "Can I show you something?" he asked. Isabel nodded, intrigued. He tapped the screen and opened a folder labeled LJ Archives. A home video began to play, grainy, warm-toned, recorded on an old camcorder. The frame wobbled for a second before settling on a woman spinning in a rehearsal room, barefoot, arms stretched wide, laughter echoing behind her like music. Isabel froze. "That's her," she whispered. Lily moved like wind and sunlight, effortless, vibrant. She wasn't posing, she wasn't performing, she was just alive. "She gave me this tape the last day we worked together," Keanu said. "Said it was just her goofing off, but I kept it. I don't know why I never watched it until now." Isabel leaned forward, tears slowly forming in the corners of her eyes. Lily twirled on screen, then ran toward the camera, smiling. She reached out, blocking the lens with a burst of laughter. "I remember that laugh," Isabel said, voice cracking. Keanu watched her, silent, respectful. The video faded to black. For a long moment they just sat there, ocean behind them, history on a screen between them, and something healing starting to unfold in the air. Isabel sniffled and wiped her cheek with the sleeve of her jacket. "I used to think I'd never know what she looked like when she was happy," she said. "That all I had were the tired years, the sick years. I thought I lost everything." Keanu turned to her. His voice was steady, soft. "But you didn't." She looked at him. "You found her again," he said, "and maybe you found me too." Isabel stared at him for a long moment, as if studying the truth in his words. "We found each other," she said quietly. Keanu reached into the bag again and pulled out a small photo. It was a still frame from the video. Lily in mid-laugh, her arms raised, joy radiating from her. "I printed this last night," he said. "I thought maybe you'd want to keep it." Isabel took the photo gently, her fingers trembling slightly. "She was beautiful," she whispered. "She still is," Keanu said. "In you." Her eyes filled again, but this time the tears didn't fall from grief. They came from something softer, something brighter. She leaned her head against his shoulder. The waves continued their slow conversation in the background, and the moment settled like a prayer between them. The tea had gone lukewarm, and the sun had dipped lower now, casting shadows that stretched across the sand like gentle reminders of time passing. Keanu poured what was left of the thermos into their cups anyway. "I didn't get you a cake," he said. Isabel chuckled, wiping her nose. "Good. I don't like cake. No candles either. Even better." She looked at him with a wry smile. "But I like this. This is more me." Keanu smiled in return. "Yeah, me too." They watched Zeus trot back toward them, his paws soaked and sandy, his tail thumping wildly. Keanu reached into the bag one last time and pulled out a folded napkin. Inside it was a single macaron lavender. Isabel's favorite. Her face lit up. "You remembered?" "I pay attention," he said, handing it to her. "That's the closest we're getting to a birthday tradition." She took a bite and closed her eyes. Perfect. For a long stretch, they said nothing. The silence wasn't empty. It was filled with everything they didn't need to explain. Because sometimes healing didn't come with a party or a speech. Sometimes it came with laughter on a beach and the echo of a mother's voice dancing in the wind. As the tide crept in, Isabel leaned back on her elbows and stared at the horizon. "I used to think birthdays were just reminders of time lost," she said. Keanu listened, nodding. "But now," she continued, "I think maybe they can be something else. A mark of survival, of choosing to keep going, even when you didn't think you could." He glanced sideways. "You've kept going for a long time." "Yeah," she said softly, "but now I want to start living." Keanu smiled. "What does that look like for you?" Isabel shrugged. "Small things. Drawing more. Maybe taking a community college class. I want to write something. About her, about us." "You should," he said. "People need that kind of story." She tilted her head toward him. "Would you read it?" "I'd treasure it," he said without hesitation. She smiled and reached into her bag, pulling out a small notebook. "Then I better get started." The light began to fade, the sea pulling silver shadows across the shore. "You gave me back more than I thought I'd ever have," she said. "A voice, a home, a memory that doesn't hurt so much anymore." Keanu touched her hand gently. "You gave me all of that too." They packed up slowly, neither in a hurry to leave. Keanu folded the blanket while Isabel gathered the thermos and cups. Zeus trotted behind them, tired but content, his fur damp and ears perked with alertness. They walked back along the narrow path to the car, the fading sky wrapping them in the hush of twilight. As they reached the edge of the parking lot, Isabel stopped and looked back. "I feel like she was here," she said, "like she got to see this." Keanu followed her gaze to the quiet water. "She was," he said, "in every laugh, in every breath." They stood there for a moment longer, the cool air brushing past like a blessing. "Next year," Isabel said. "Can we come here again?" "Every year," Keanu replied. She smiled, then looped her arm through his. They drove home in silence, but it wasn't heavy. It was full. The kind of silence that wraps around you like an old quilt, worn but warm. When they got back, Keanu placed the video tablet and the still photo of Lily on the mantel, framed beside a candle Isabel had lit earlier. The flame flickered gently. A life once lost had found its way home. Later that night, after Keanu had gone to bed, Isabel stood in the quiet living room, holding the photograph of her mother. The lamp cast a soft glow across the walls, and the air smelled faintly of cinnamon and sea salt. She took a pen and a small square of paper from the desk drawer and began to write. "Dear Mom," she wrote, "thank you for saving the good parts. Thank you for the stories, the laughter, and for not letting me forget who I am." She paused, then added, "And thank you for finding him again. You were right, I was never alone. I just hadn't met him yet." She folded the note and placed it inside the wooden box that held the screen test tape and her mother's old necklace. Then she set the box gently on the mantel, beside the photo. A breeze brushed the curtain beside her, cool and calming. She whispered into the room, "Happy birthday to me." And then she turned out the light. In the darkness, the photo remained, the echo of Lily's smile still shining. Outside, the moon rose quietly above the ocean, casting silver across the earth. And in that peace, they rested. It started with a sentence. One evening, weeks after Isabel's birthday on the beach, Keanu found himself sitting alone in his home office, watching her scribble into her notebook on the patio just outside the sliding glass door. The early light of dusk wrapped around her like a watercolor wash, and she didn't notice him watching. She was deep in thought, biting her pen cap, eyes scanning the horizon between sentences. That's when it hit him. The stories she was writing weren't just personal. They were necessary. He saw in her the same hunger he'd once had for expression, for meaning, for a way out of silence. But he also saw something he never had growing up: resilience that was sharpened by years of instability, heartbreak, and self-reliance. He opened his laptop. No grand plan, no fanfare. He typed the words into a blank document at first, almost like journaling. What if we made it easier for someone like her? From there, it grew. Keanu contacted a longtime friend in the nonprofit world who had experience setting up education trusts. Quietly, privately, with no public statement, he outlined what he wanted: a scholarship for young adults aging out of the foster care system with dreams in the arts. The scholarship would be called simply the Sky Fund, a subtle nod to the title of Isabel's first story collection, The Sky Between Us. He worked out the logistics over several weeks. It would cover tuition, creative supplies, and small living stipends for youth who had a passion for writing, filmmaking, animation, photography, or illustration. Not just college programs, workshops, mentorships, even short-term courses. Anything that encouraged their creative voice. But the most important part? Keanu didn't want his name anywhere near it. The donor would remain anonymous, listed only as a private benefactor. No press release, no foundation gala, just quiet approvals behind the scenes. "This isn't about legacy," he told the program director in one email. "It's about giving the kind of support that should have been there all along." By the time the paperwork was finalized, the first 3 recipients had already been selected for the following year's launch. One from Oregon, one from New York, one from Texas. Each of them reminded Keanu of Isabel in a different way. A shy poet who lived in the back of her uncle's mechanic shop. A graphic novelist who'd been sketching since foster care at age 7. A student filmmaker who hadn't owned a working laptop in 4 years. It wasn't supposed to come out, but good things have a way of surfacing. One quiet morning, Isabel was sipping coffee at the local bookstore cafe when her phone buzzed. A friend had sent her a link to a short online article titled "New Scholarship Empowers Foster Youth Artists," inspired by local writer. Isabel clicked the link casually, assuming it was some human interest piece. But as she scrolled, her eyebrows lifted. The article mentioned a young writer named Isabel, whose journey had quietly inspired an anonymous donation from a celebrity benefactor. The program had recently opened applications, and one of the program directors had been quoted in the article. "She doesn't even know she's the reason this exists, but she will. The Sky Fund wouldn't exist without her story." Isabel froze. She read it again, then a third time. She didn't cry. Not at first. She just sat very still, letting the meaning of it settle inside her, like morning sun over still water. Then she stood, coffee forgotten on the table, and walked out the door, barely remembering to grab her bag, headed toward Keanu's house. When she arrived, he was in the garden, wearing gloves, trimming basil. He looked up and saw her standing there, holding her phone. "You didn't have to do that," she said, voice trembling just slightly. Keanu took off his gloves, dusting his hands on his jeans. "I know." "Then why?" she asked, stepping closer. "Why go through all that trouble and not even tell me?" He looked down at the green leaves in his palm, then back at her. "Because I get to," he said softly. "Because I wanted to. And because someone once gave me a shot when they didn't have to." She stood there for a moment, absorbing it. I don't want people thinking I'm some charity case," she said. Keanu nodded. "You're not. And this isn't about you needing anything. It's about someone else needing a voice like yours. You gave that to me. I just passed it on." For a moment, Isabel didn't speak. Then her eyes softened. "You're impossible. I get that a lot." She threw her arms around him and hugged him tight. "You're also kind of amazing," she murmured. He smiled against her shoulder. "Don't let that get out. I have a reputation to maintain." She laughed. It was full and real, and the garden around them filled with the scent of new beginnings. A month later, Isabel received an email from the program coordinator of the Sky Fund. asking if she'd consider speaking at one of the first creative writing workshops they were sponsoring. The coordinator didn't know she was connected to the original donor. They simply knew she'd been writing stories that mattered. She said yes. The workshop took place in a small community center near downtown. There were a dozen teens in folding chairs, notebooks open, eyes wide with curiosity and nerves. Some had never written a story before. Others carried tattered journals like lifelines. Isabel stood at the front of the room with trembling hands but a strong voice. "I don't know everything," she told them, "but I know what it feels like to think no one sees you. I know what it means to believe your story doesn't matter." She paused. "But it does. You do." The room was silent. Then a boy in the front row raised his hand. "Do you think someone like me could write a book one day?" Isabel smiled. "I think someone like you already has everything it takes." Afterward, she sat with them, read their work, offered quiet encouragement, and walked away feeling changed. That evening, back at home, Isabel found Keanu in the kitchen, chopping onions for dinner. She leaned against the counter and watched him for a moment. "You know," she said, "I think today was the first time I felt not just lucky to be alive, but proud to be part of something." Keanu set the knife down and turned to her. "You always were part of something," he said. "You just hadn't seen the full picture yet." She nodded, biting her bottom lip. "And now I see it," she said, "clearer than ever." He passed her a spoon to stir the soup. As the steam rose, Isabel added, "You're going to change lives with this. You already have." Keanu's voice was quiet. "You changed mine first." They didn't need a toast or a title or applause. Just a pot of soup simmering, a window open to the breeze. And the knowledge that sometimes the most powerful legacies aren't written in headlines, but in the quiet lift of someone who believes you're worth helping stand. She looked up at him, smiling. "You're going to need a bigger bookshelf." "For what?" "For all the stories that are about to be born." The next morning, Isabel sat at her desk, pen in hand, sunlight spilling across the page. She was writing something new, not just for herself this time, but for the next girl, the next boy, the next soul wondering if their story mattered. She titled it, "The Ones Who Stay Quiet Until They Don't." It began with a sentence. This story was almost never written. Outside, Zeus barked at birds, the world hummed along. In the living room, the mantel had grown. Beside the photo of Lily and the frame from Isabel's birthday sat a new addition, a thank you card from one of the first scholarship recipients. Hand-drawn, colorful, messy, and perfect. Keanu had read it aloud the night it arrived. One line stuck with him. "I thought I was invisible. Then someone gave me paper and said, 'Write it anyway.'" That afternoon, Isabel received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a photo of one of the students she met at the workshop, grinning, holding their first published poem. On the back, they had written, "Thank you for being proof." That evening, Keanu found Isabel sitting on the porch, legs tucked beneath her, the letter still in her lap. He didn't say anything at first, just handed her a fresh mug of tea and sat down beside her. For a while, they watched the wind move through the trees. "Did you ever think," Isabel asked softly, "that all of this could happen? That life could come back around?" Keanu thought for a moment. "No," he admitted, "but I hoped." She nodded, accepting that answer like a gift. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting gold through the leaves, Keanu glanced over and said, "You're going to do incredible things." "I already am," she said. "We both are." And in that quiet, tea-sipping moment, nothing more needed to be said. Just two souls, rebuilt by truth, choice, and love, sitting side by side at the start of something brand new. It was Isabel's idea. They were sitting on a bench near the Bluffs in Portland, sipping takeout smoothies after browsing a local used bookshop. The sun was high and soft over the trees, and birds flitted through the branches above them. Isabel glanced at her phone, checking the time, then turned to Keanu. "We've never taken a photo," she said. He blinked, caught off guard. "You mean, like, Together? Yeah, like a real one, not a red carpet, not some press thing, just us. Keanu smiled slowly, the kind of smile that starts in the heart. Okay, how shall we do it? Isabel pulled a little camera from her bag, not a phone, an old film one, the kind with a timer and a soft click. Set it on that bench over there. I'll hit the timer, run back, and sit beside you. Keanu stood and helped her set the shot, adjusting the angle until it caught the trees, the bench, and just a sliver of blue sky. They tried it once, too crooked. A second time, too blurry. The third shot was perfect. 2 people. Shoulder to shoulder. Nothing fancy. Just matching smiles and a quiet kind of joy that didn't need to be explained. Later that evening, back at Keanu's home, Isabel developed the film herself in a small makeshift darkroom she'd set up in the laundry room. She called him over just as the image finished drying on the line. "There," she whispered. "That's us." He stared at it for a long time. Something about it felt more real than most of the images taken of him across his entire career. It wasn't the composition, it wasn't the lighting. It was the truth in their eyes, the ease, the unspoken bond between them. Keanu took a copy of the photo and slid it into a simple wooden frame. Then, without a word, he carried it into his study. On the shelf beside his desk stood a photo of Lily, smiling, young, full of motion even in stillness. He placed the new picture right beside hers. Then he pulled out a pen and wrote on the back of the frame, "Family isn't who you start with, it's who shows up when it matters." Isabel peeked over his shoulder and smiled. "Can I have a copy for my journal?" "Of course," he said, handing her a duplicate print. She tucked it carefully between the pages, near her favorite poem. That night, Isabel sat on her bed with her journal open across her knees. The photo was already nestled inside, but she hadn't written anything yet. For a long time, she just stared at it. She thought about her mother, about how Lily had carried so much alone, about the secrets she kept, not to shut Isabel out, but maybe to protect her. She thought about the years of wondering, of drifting, of waiting for someone who might never show up. And then he did. She picked up her pen and wrote underneath the photo, "This is the day I stopped needing proof." She closed the journal, pressed it to her chest, and exhaled. In the hallway, Keanu was reading a book, feet up, glasses on, pretending not to be listening. But he was always listening. When she came out and sat beside him without saying a word, he closed the book and reached for her hand. She held it. That was all. No explanation needed. Just the weight of 2 lives, finally leaning toward one another, no longer strangers. Not just family in name, but family in action. It was the kind of moment even photographs couldn't fully hold. The next morning, over a quiet breakfast of toast and blackberries, Keanu reached into a drawer near the kitchen and pulled out a worn envelope. "I want to show you something," he said. Inside was an old black and white photograph, creased and faded. A young Keanu, no older than 10, standing barefoot in front of a weathered building, a backpack slung over one shoulder. His smile in the photo was shy but determined. "My mom took this right before we moved again. We moved a lot," he said, tracing the edges. "She told me, wherever you go, find something that feels like home, even if it's just a good book or a kind face." Isabel leaned closer. "Did you?" Keanu looked up at her. Eventually, she touched the photo gently, like it was part of a puzzle that now made more sense. "Why would you keep it?" He paused. "To remind me that even when things felt unstable, I was still growing, still becoming." Isabel nodded. "And now?" He smiled. "Now, I don't have to look for home. I get to make it, with the people who show up." They sat in warm silence, the sound of wind against the window pane their only companion. That afternoon, Isabel returned from a walk carrying a small gift bag. Inside was a blank photo album, leather-bound, handmade, stitched with care. "What's this?" Keanu asked as she handed it to him. "Our new tradition," she said. One photo a year, just us. No lights, no poses, just the truth of who we are in that moment. He turned the pages slowly. Blank. Ready. I like it, he said. I already wrote the title on the first page, she added, a little bashfully. He flipped it open. The Years We Almost Missed was written in her delicate script. Keanu swallowed the sudden lump in his throat. They placed the first photo, the one from the park bench, in the opening slot. Beneath it, Isabel wrote the date. No captions, just the image and the day. She handed him the pen. Next year, your turn. He nodded, capping the pen and setting the book gently on the coffee table. It wasn't about the photo. It was about making space for memory, for presence, for wit. They wouldn't always have the same bench or the same sky, but they'd have the pages, and they'd fill them together. 2 days later, they visited Lily's resting place for the first time together. The cemetery was quiet, tucked beneath a canopy of old cedar trees. A soft breeze rustled the leaves as Isabel carried a small bouquet of lavender and wild daisies, her mother's favorite. Keanu followed with the photo, carefully wrapped in cloth. They knelt together at the gravestone. No words for a long while, just breath and memory. Then Isabel placed the flowers down and said, "We brought something." She unwrapped the photograph and set it gently at the base of the headstone. The picture of her and Keanu, 2 smiles on a park bench, rested against the stone like a promise fulfilled. She would have liked it, Isabel said, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. She always hoped we'd find each other. Keanu brushed his thumb over the edge of the frame. "She gave me you," he whispered, "and I didn't even know it." Isabel reached for his hand. The sky above them shimmered with afternoon light, filtering through the trees. They didn't say goodbye. They just stood up together, hand in hand, walking away not from the past, but with it. And something in them both felt lighter. Back in Los Angeles, Keanu returned to his private studio, a quiet, sunlit room above the garage, filled with books, old scripts, and framed memories. On one shelf sat the photo of Monica, smiling on her birthday with friends around her. He paused in front of it for a long moment. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out the newest frame, the picture of him and Isabel on the park bench. He placed it beside Monica's, aligning them carefully. 2 women, 2 redemptions, 2 pieces of him he hadn't known he was missing until they returned. He wrote a simple card and tucked it behind the new frame. "You were never forgotten, only waiting to be remembered." Then he stood back and let the silence settle around him like a familiar coat. Outside the window, birds danced between the orange trees. A breeze swept through the curtains. The scent of eucalyptus hung in the air. Keanu didn't need applause or validation. He needed this. A still room, a quiet truth, and 2 faces he would never stop showing up for. He turned off the light, closed the door gently, and carried the piece of it back into the world. Weeks later, Isabel flipped through her journal and paused on the page with the photograph. She traced the edge of the image with her finger, then smiled and wrote underneath in soft ink. "Some family is chosen, some is found, and some waits in silence until love finally speaks." Downstairs, Keanu was humming in the kitchen, the smell of coffee drifting upward. Zeus padded through the hallway, tail wagging. Isabel closed the journal, tucked it under her arm, and descended the stairs with slow, peaceful steps. On the shelf in Keanu's studio, the photo remained, framed in light, flanked by memory, glowing with a quiet kind of forever. And for once in both their lives, nothing felt missing. The sky was a soft shade of gold as the sun began its slow descent over the California hills. In a quiet park not far from the coast, Keanu sat beneath a wide, old tree, its branches casting gentle shadows across the grass. The wind rustled through the leaves like a soft lullaby. Beside him, Isabel sat cross-legged with a sketchpad balanced on her knees, her brow furrowed in thought, pencil dancing gently across the page. She didn't say much while she worked, never had to. Her expression told the story. Calm, focused, content. Keanu glanced over at her and smiled. This was becoming one of their shared rituals. a quiet place, a safe moment. No deadlines, no noise, just breath, breeze, and a sketchbook. He leaned back against the tree and closed his eyes for a moment. Voiceover. I didn't expect to be a father. I didn't expect her to be real, but she is. And somehow, I think I was waiting for her my whole life. His eyes opened slowly. He watched Isabel adjust her page and lean in to add a detail. The edges of her hair caught the light. Her lips curled slightly in thought. She looked at peace. So did he. Keanu let his gaze wander to the horizon, where the ocean shimmered in the distance. A seagull drifted overhead. Somewhere behind them, a child laughed, and a dog barked joyfully. The world kept turning. And yet, inside him, something had paused. Something quiet and sacred. He had lived a life of unexpected turns. Fame had come, love had vanished, grief had left him hollow at times. But then, this letter, this girl, this chance. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the same photograph they had taken on that park bench in Portland. It had traveled with him everywhere since, tucked into scripts, jacket linings, even hotel room mirrors. It wasn't just a memory. It was proof that some things are worth showing up for, even late. That some people don't need to be in your past to be part of your future. He looked at Isabel again. Her fingers moved with grace, the way her mother's once had on stage. The thought stirred something in him, a blend of sorrow and thankfulness. He missed Lily, but through Isabel, a part of her breathed still. And through this new chapter, he had become something he never expected. "Whole. Done," Isabel said softly. Keanu turned toward her. She turned the sketch pad around, revealing a pencil drawing of two figures beneath a tree. One older, seated with a soft smile, and one younger, drawing peacefully. The likeness was unmistakable. "It's us," she said. Keanu blinked. "You even got my crooked posture." She smirked. Artistic accuracy. They laughed quietly. A breeze lifted the corner of the paper and fluttered it like a bird's wing. He leaned over and traced the outline of the drawing with his eyes. "You captured the feeling." Isabel looked down. "It's the first time I've drawn something that didn't feel like a memory or a wish. Just now." That silence again, but this time it was full. "Do you want to keep it?" she asked. "No," Keanu replied, his voice warm. "I want you to. One day you'll draw the next part." She tilted her head. "What's the next part?" He thought for a moment. "Whatever we write together." She smiled, tucked the sketch carefully into her bag and sat back, closing her eyes to the sun. There was nothing more to say. The photo in his pocket, the drawing in her hands, and a bond that didn't need words anymore. Keanu stood slowly, brushing the grass from his coat. He took a few steps toward the edge of the park, where the tree's shadow met the path. The ocean breeze tousled his hair, and the late afternoon sun dipped just a little lower. He looked out at the waves. Voiceover. "We think we know the story life has written for us, but sometimes there's a chapter we didn't see coming, a name we hadn't heard, a face we'd been waiting for without knowing it." Behind him, Isabel rose and gathered her things. She didn't rush. She didn't speak. They didn't need to anymore. Voiceover. This is mine. And if you've been waiting for your next chapter, for your second chance, I hope you know it's never too late to turn the page. Keanu turned slowly toward the camera, eyes clear, voice steady. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe, because someone out there might be looking for their family too, and maybe, just maybe, you're part of the story they're waiting for. He nodded once, a quiet smile. Then he turned back toward Isabel. As they walked together along the winding trail, Isabel looked up at Keanu and asked, "Do you still carry that photo?" He reached into his coat and pulled it out without a word, the one from Portland, worn now at the edges. He handed it to her. She smiled. "Why this one? We've taken others since." Keanu paused, thoughtful. because it was the first one where I saw myself, not as an actor or a name, just as a dad. Isabel's breath caught. She looked down at the photo again. You were always there, you know, even when I didn't know who you were. I think I hoped for someone like you. He placed a hand gently on her back. And I was waiting for someone like you. They stopped at a small wooden bench overlooking the sea. Isabel sat, tucking the photo back into his coat for him. This one belongs close, she whispered. Keanu nodded, eyes stinging. The sun finally touched the water's edge, casting long golden beams across the waves. And there, with salt air in their lungs and peace in their hearts, father and daughter sat side by side. No more words, just presence.